As the quarterback of America's team, Troy Aikman carried a level of pressure few could ever imagine. Week after week, he lined up against some of the fiercest defenders and most talented quarterbacks in the game. Yet, long after hanging up his cleats, Aikman looked back on his career and identified one name that stood above the rest, the toughest opponent he had ever faced. For him, it wasn't about wins, stats, or championships. It was about the relentless challenge of going head-to-head with someone who simply refused to bend. And now, at 58, Aikman has finally revealed the rival who pushed him harder than anyone else. But before we get into that, let's take it back to where it all began. Troy Kenneth Aikman entered the world on November 21st, 1966, in West Covina, California. With his blonde hair and blue eyes, he looked every bit the Southern California kid. He spent his childhood in Cerritos, pedaling his bike through the neighborhood and living just a stone's throw from Knott's Berry Farm. Back then, his biggest dream wasn't football. It was baseball. He wanted nothing more than to become a professional ball player. That dream shifted in 1979 when his parents packed up the family and moved from sunny California to a 170-acre ranch outside of Henrietta, Oklahoma. For 12-year-old Troy, it was a tough adjustment. Instead of neighborhood streets and amusement parks, he now had dirt roads, farm chores, and livestock to care for. He fed pigs and goats before school, hauled hay in the summer, and worked the land like any farm kid. Later in life, he admitted that those daily responsibilities instilled a work ethic that would carry him from small-town Oklahoma all the way to the Dallas Cowboys. At first, he believed baseball would remain his path. Oklahoma, however, was different. Football was king, and soon, the sport began calling him in. Aikman wasn't even going to play in high school until his father insisted. That push changed everything. He enrolled at Henrietta High, joined the Henrietta Hens, and stepped in as quarterback right away. His coaches immediately recognized the raw talent in his arm. One coach later recalled that the freshman's ability stood out instantly, even if nobody could have predicted just how far it would take him. Life in Henrietta also uncovered a surprising skill. Looking for an easy class, Aikman signed up for typing. He quickly mastered it, breezing through assignments ahead of his classmates. What started as a shortcut ended with him winning a state typing competition, an achievement that amused him given his athletic reputation, but one he later admitted was more useful than he ever imagined in the computer age. By the time college recruiters came calling, Aikman was a star athlete in both baseball and football. Barry Switzer of the Oklahoma Sooners delivered a convincing pitch, promising an offense that would highlight Aikman's arm. Behind the scenes, though, Switzer was selling different visions to different recruits. Some were told Oklahoma would pass more, while others heard they'd stick with the run-heavy wishbone. Aikman chose to believe in the passing attack and committed to the Sooners. Baseball wasn't entirely out of the picture. The New York Mets made a serious push to sign him as a pitcher and shortstop, even calling to ask what it would take for him to give up football. Aikman threw out a figure, $200,000. The Mets balked, wished him luck in football, and moved on. Ironically, their first-round pick that year, Sean Abner, signed for less than Aikman's asking price and never played a single game for them. At Oklahoma, Aikman made history by becoming the first freshman to start at quarterback since World War II. But his debut was rocky. The second-ranked Sooners were stunned in a loss to Kansas, and Aikman struggled badly, completing only 2 passes while throwing 3 interceptions. Afterward, he admitted he had been overwhelmed, barely able to run the offense. Switzer summed it up with blunt honesty. The young quarterback had been scared to death. At just 17 years old, Troy Aikman was learning that the road to greatness wasn't going to be easy. After redshirting his freshman year, Troy Aikman stepped in as the starting quarterback for Oklahoma in 1985. But his experience in Norman was nothing like what he had imagined. The Sooners were committed to the wishbone offense, a system built around speed, option runs, and quarterbacks who threw the ball only a handful of times each game. Aikman, a tall, traditional drop-back passer, felt like a square peg in a round hole. He admitted later that he never truly felt comfortable in that system. The pressure was enormous from the very beginning. Oklahoma entered the season ranked number 1 in the country, and even coach Barry Switzer admitted it was unusual to place that kind of expectation on a team breaking in a brand new quarterback. On top of that, Aikman's style was the polar opposite of what Sooner fans were used to seeing. Instead of an elusive runner, they had a pocket passer who looked like he belonged in the NFL more than in a wishbone attack. Still, Aikman silenced doubts in the early weeks. He started the first 3 games of the season, leading the Sooners to victories in all of them, including a hard-fought 14-7 win over rival Texas. His play was sharp and efficient, proving he could succeed even in a scheme that didn't fit his natural strengths. Then came the showdown against Jimmy Johnson's powerhouse Miami Hurricanes. Aikman looked brilliant that afternoon, completing 6 of 7 passes for 131 yards and a touchdown. He even showed surprising mobility, breaking loose on a long run that could have been a 47-yard touchdown if not for an official ruling him out of bounds after 26 yards. By the second quarter, he had the Sooners driving deep into Miami territory, and the offense was humming in a way fans in Norman had never seen under the wishbone. But in a single moment, it all came crashing down. Miami defensive tackle Jerome Brown broke through the line, wrapped Aikman up, and drove him to the turf. The hit snapped his ankle, ending his season. At that point, Oklahoma's offense had racked up 218 yards on just 27 plays. Without Aikman, the production fell flat. Over the rest of the game, the Sooners managed only 144 yards on 50 plays, eventually falling 27-14 to the Hurricanes. The injury opened the door for true freshman Jamel Holloway. He couldn't turn the tide against Miami that afternoon, but he quickly showed he was a natural fit for the wishbone. From there, Holloway led Oklahoma to 7 straight wins to close out the season. In the Orange Bowl, he and the Sooners dominated top-ranked Penn State, winning 25-10 and securing the school's 6th national championship. Meanwhile, on that same day, Miami fell in the Sugar Bowl to Tennessee. In a twist of fate, the Hurricanes coach Jimmy Johnson and wide receiver Michael Irvin would later cross paths with Aikman again, this time in Dallas, where all 3 would help build a dynasty with the Cowboys. Now, by the start of 1986, Troy Aikman knew his days in Norman were numbered. He had the arm, the size, and the talent to be Oklahoma's quarterback. But Jamel Holloway had something Aikman couldn't match. He was a perfect fit for Barry Switzer's wishbone offense. Holloway had just led the Sooners to a national championship, and Aikman could see the writing on the wall. Switzer still hoped to keep both quarterbacks on the roster. Years later, he admitted that he and his staff even considered splitting time between the two. But Aikman wasn't looking to share snaps. He wanted to run a passing offense, not hand the ball off in a run-heavy scheme. Switzer, recognizing his quarterback's frustration, decided to help him find a better fit. He picked up the phone and personally called UCLA head coach Terry Donahue, an old friend. Donahue jumped at the chance to bring Aikman back to Southern California, a place that fit both his personality and his playing style. Looking back, Switzer often reflected that Oklahoma could have won another national championship in 1985 if Aikman had stayed healthy. But fate had different plans. Because of transfer rules, Aikman had to sit out the 1986 season. He used that time to master the Bruins playbook, preparing himself for the moment he could finally take the field. When 1987 arrived, Aikman was ready. Surrounded by playmakers like running backs Eric Ball and Gaston Green and wide receiver Flipper Anderson, he finally had the chance to unleash his arm. That year, he threw for over 2,500 yards, tossed 17 touchdowns, and led UCLA to a 10-2 record capped by an Aloha Bowl win over Florida. His performance earned him Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year. The following season, in 1988, he built on that momentum. Aikman threw for more than 2,700 yards and 24 touchdowns, guiding the Bruins to another 10-2 season that ended with a Cotton Bowl victory against Arkansas. He was named co-MVP of that game, earned consensus All-American honors, won the Davey O'Brien Award, and finished 3rd in the Heisman Trophy voting, behind Barry Sanders and Rodney Peete. By the end of his college career, Aikman had thrown for 5,781 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 21 interceptions, achievements that eventually earned him a spot in the College Football Hall of Fame. January 1989 brought Aikman back to Dallas for the Cotton Bowl, but this time the stakes were different. The Cowboys' leadership, including legendary head coach Tom Landry, was in attendance to scout him. local media buzzed with speculation that Aikman could become the next face of the franchise. The Cowboys' glory years under Landry were fading. After 2 decades of dominance, the team had hit a wall in the mid-'80s, enduring losing seasons in 1986 and 1987, before collapsing completely in 1988 with a 3-13 record. Change was inevitable, and when Jerry Jones bought the team, his very first move was to fire Landry, a decision that shook the NFL. Jones then brought in his former Arkansas teammate Jimmy Johnson to rebuild the franchise from the ground up. With the first pick in the 1989 NFL Draft, the Cowboys selected Troy Aikman. He signed a 6-year, $11.2 million deal, which made him not only the highest-paid rookie in league history, but also the 3rd highest-paid player in all of football at the time. For the Cowboys, Aikman represented a fresh start. For Aikman, it was the fulfillment of a dream, wearing the star on his helmet and stepping onto the field for America's team. The Cowboys were in shambles, though. Aside from wide receiver Michael Irvin, who had been drafted the year before, there wasn't much talent on the roster. That same 1989 draft brought in future cornerstones like center Mark Stepnoski, fullback Daryl Moose Johnston, and defensive end Tony Tolbert, but the rebuild would take time. The most important move came later that year when Jerry Jones traded star running back Herschel Walker to Minnesota for a haul of players and draft picks, a deal that would eventually reshape the franchise. Aikman's rookie year was rough, brutal even. The Cowboys limped to a 1-15 record, their worst since the franchise's early days. Aikman started 11 games, throwing for 1,749 yards and 9 touchdowns, but also tossing 18 interceptions. Most of the time, he was running for his life, scrambling so much that he set a career high with 302 rushing yards. Even so, he still made the PFWA All-Rookie team. To make matters harder, Michael Irvin went down in Week 6 with a torn ACL, leaving Aikman without his best weapon. With no real rhythm to build on, the season felt like survival. But by 1990, Irvin was back, and the Cowboys were starting to rebuild around their young quarterback. The Herschel Walker trade gave Dallas the draft picks it needed to stockpile talent, and in the 1990 draft, the team added Florida running back Emmitt Smith, defensive tackle Jimmy Jones, and safety Kenneth Gant. They also brought in tight end Jay Novacek, giving Aikman another reliable option. That season, Aikman showed real growth, throwing for 2,579 yards and 11 touchdowns. But the learning curve was still steep. He tossed 18 interceptions and was sacked 39 times. Even so, the Cowboys were no longer the easy win they had been. They finished with 7 victories, a major step forward. The following year delivered one of the most important drafts in franchise history. Dallas picked up Russell Maryland, Alvin Harper, Dixon Edwards, Godfrey Miles, Eric Williams, Leon Lett, and Larry Brown. Players who would become cornerstones of the dynasty years. Surrounded by more weapons, Aikman elevated his play. He passed for 2,754 yards, 11 touchdowns, and cut his interceptions nearly in half. That performance earned him his first Pro Bowl selection, and the Cowboys finished with 11 wins, their highest total since 1983. They reached the postseason, beating the Chicago Bears in the wild card round before falling to the Detroit Lions. What happened next was one of the fastest and most remarkable turnarounds in NFL history. By 1992, just 3 years removed from a 1-15 record, the Cowboys won 13 games. Aikman posted career highs with 3,445 yards and 23 touchdowns, while a loaded roster featuring Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, Novacek, and a reinforced defense surged into contention. New additions like Darren Woodson from the draft and Charles Haley through free agency only strengthened the team. That season ended with Dallas steamrolling its way through the playoffs, taking down the Eagles and 49ers to earn a spot in Super Bowl 27 against the Buffalo Bills. For Aikman, it was poetic. The game was played at the Rose Bowl, the same stadium where he had once starred for UCLA. The Cowboys dominated from start to finish, crushing the Bills 52-17. Aikman was brilliant, throwing for 273 yards and 4 touchdowns without a single interception, a performance that earned him Super Bowl MVP honors. The Cowboys carried that momentum into 1993, though the season began with drama. Emmitt Smith held out of the first 2 games, and Dallas stumbled to an 0-2 start. Once he returned, however, the legendary trio of Aikman, Smith, and Irvin caught fire. Aikman delivered one of his most efficient seasons, throwing for over 3,100 yards, 15 touchdowns, and leading the league with a 69.1 completion percentage. The team marched through the playoffs once again, knocking off the Packers and beating the 49ers in the NFC Championship for the 2nd straight year. That set up a rematch with the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 28. Buffalo, making its 4th consecutive Super Bowl appearance, looked determined to finally break through, leading 13-6 at halftime. But in the second half, Dallas took control. Emmitt Smith pounded the Bills' defense for 2 touchdowns, and the Cowboys secured their 2nd straight title with a 30-13 victory. Aikman threw for 207 yards and 1 interception, steady enough to guide his team to back-to-back championships. Then in 1994, the Dallas Cowboys were chasing history, aiming for a 3rd straight championship. But before the season even began, the team made headlines when Jerry Jones fired Jimmy Johnson and replaced him with Barry Switzer, who had once coached Troy Aikman at Oklahoma. The change didn't shake the team's confidence. Aikman put together a steady season, passing for over 2,600 yards and 13 touchdowns, while the Cowboys rolled to a 12-4 record. In the playoffs, they dismantled the Green Bay Packers in the divisional round, but their run came to an end in the NFC Championship. Facing the San Francisco 49ers for the 3rd consecutive year, Dallas finally fell short, losing 38-28 and watching their dream of a three-peat slip away. That disappointment didn't linger for long. In 1995, the Cowboys were once again dominant, winning 12 games with Aikman leading the way. He threw for 3,304 yards, 16 touchdowns, and just 7 interceptions, finishing with the lowest interception rate in the league. Broadcasters and analysts often praised his sharp decision-making, consistency, and pinpoint accuracy, qualities that defined him at his best. The postseason was a showcase of Dallas's power. They took care of Philadelphia, then Green Bay, and punched their ticket to Super Bowl 30 to face the Pittsburgh Steelers. By halftime, Aikman had already connected with tight end Jay Novacek for a touchdown, helping Dallas build a lead they would never give up. The Steelers made a late push in the 4th quarter, but the Cowboys closed it out with a 27-17 victory. With that, Aikman earned his 3rd Super Bowl ring in just 7 seasons, becoming the first quarterback ever to win 3 championships in a 4-year span. Only one other quarterback has matched that feat since. Former Cowboys legend Roger Staubach credited Aikman with bringing the franchise back to glory in the 1990s, making them exciting to watch again. And Aikman himself never measured his career by numbers. Years later, he reflected on his time with Dallas, saying that the 94 regular season wins and 11 postseason victories meant far more to him than touchdowns or passing yards. To him, it was all about winning, even if that meant sacrificing personal stats, something he pointed out not every player was willing to do. Playing alongside Emmitt Smith, the NFL's all-time rushing leader, certainly cut into Aikman's passing numbers, but it also created the perfect balance that made the Cowboys nearly unstoppable. Still, the dynasty didn't last forever. In 1996, Dallas went 10-6 and reached the playoffs, but they were eliminated in the divisional round by the Carolina Panthers. That year marked Aikman's 6th and final Pro Bowl appearance after he threw for 3,126 yards with 12 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. The following season, he put up over 3,200 yards and 19 touchdowns and was honored with the Walter Payton Man of the Year award for his community and charity work. Unfortunately, the Cowboys stumbled to just 6 wins in 1997, which cost Barry Switzer his job. Dallas hired former Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator Chan Gailey in 1998. Under his leadership, the team clawed its way back to the postseason in both 1998 and 1999. Aikman continued to play at a high level, throwing for nearly 3,000 yards and 17 touchdowns in 1999, but both years ended the same way, with early exits in the wild card round. By the year 2000, the Dallas Cowboys were no longer the dominant force they once had been. Jerry Jones turned to Dave Campo as head coach, hoping he could bring the team back to championship form. But the stars of the glory years were fading. Michael Irvin and Daryl Johnston had already been forced into retirement because of injuries. And while the offensive line still featured talent like Eric Williams, Larry Allen, and Flozell Adams, they struggled to keep Troy Aikman upright. The hits piled up, and with them came a series of concussions that began to chip away at the quarterback's career. The breaking point arrived in Week 15 against Washington. Linebacker LeVar Arrington delivered a crushing blow that left Aikman with yet another concussion. It ended his season, and Dallas stumbled to a 5-11 finish. Even then, the plan was for Aikman to return. A 7-year, $70 million contract extension was waiting in the spring of 2001. But Jerry Jones had seen enough. Concerned for his quarterback's health and staring at a massive financial commitment, he made the gut-wrenching decision to waive the man who had led the Cowboys to 3 Super Bowls. Jones' move was as much about business as it was about loyalty. Keeping Aikman meant paying a $7 million bonus and locking into a contract that ran through 2007, while his repeated concussions and back issues made the future uncertain. Releasing him cleared space under the salary cap, but it also signaled the end of an era. Aikman, only 34 and still burning to play, wasn't ready to walk away. His agent Lee Steinberg explained that while teams would hesitate to sign an injury-prone quarterback, Troy's competitive fire hadn't dimmed. For a moment, it seemed like he might find a second chapter elsewhere. San Diego looked like a natural fit under Norv Turner, his former offensive coordinator, but the Chargers chose Doug Flutie instead. A year later, in 2002, the Philadelphia Eagles came calling. Their star quarterback, Donovan McNabb, had gone down with an ankle injury, and Andy Reid reached out. The timing was surreal. Aikman received the call in the middle of broadcasting a game. For a brief moment, he wrestled with the idea of leaving the California sun for a comeback in Philadelphia, but when it came time to decide, he stayed put. Another chance appeared with Miami in 2003, but by then it was clear his playing days were behind him. When Aikman officially retired, the weight of the moment hit everyone around him. Daryl Johnston admitted that Troy was the one they all assumed would last the longest, and his departure signaled the end of the Cowboys dynasty. The triplets, Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin, had once dragged Dallas from the bottom of the league to the very top, capturing 3 Super Bowls and cementing themselves as legends. Their bond pushed each of them higher, with Aikman's steady leadership and unshakable determination setting the tone. His career spoke for itself. 6 Pro Bowls, every major Cowboys passing record, and 3 championship rings. Broadcaster Pat Summerall, who saw countless quarterbacks over the decades, described him as one of the most accurate and intelligent to ever play the game. Teammates recalled his calm presence in the huddle, the quiet confidence that let everyone know he could beat whoever lined up across from him. Retirement, though, wasn't easy. At his farewell press conference, Aikman often had to pause to fight back tears. For someone known for his stoicism, it revealed how deeply the game and the relationships built within it mattered to him. Friends like Michael Irvin and Daryl Johnston had already gone through the same painful transition, and they spoke with him often about what life after football might look like. In the end, Aikman walked away with the same steady resolve he showed on the field. Those who knew him best, teammates like Jason Garrett and coaches like Butch Davis, never doubted he'd bring that same discipline into the next chapter of his life. His playing days were done, but his legacy was set in stone. For 12 seasons, Aikman was the backbone of the Dallas Cowboys, and when the franchise remembers its greatest moments, his name will always be front and center. But after hanging up his cleats, Aikman had one more thing to share: the identity of the toughest player he ever faced. It was one of the rarest storylines in NFL history, a Super Bowl rematch featuring the same 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. To this day, it remains the only time 2 signal callers have gone head-to-head in consecutive Super Bowls. For the Buffalo Bills and Jim Kelly, the outcome was devastating. Already struggling with a string of heartbreaks, the team endured back-to-back defeats against Troy Aikman and the Dallas Cowboys, falling 52-17 one year and 30-13 the next. Those losses cemented Kelly's place in an unfortunate record book, making him the only quarterback ever to lose 4 consecutive Super Bowls without tasting victory. Aikman, meanwhile, experienced the opposite fate. The Cowboys' triumphs over Buffalo delivered him the first 2 of his 3 Super Bowl rings. In their first meeting, his commanding performance earned him the game's Most Valuable Player award, a shining moment that highlighted the sharp contrast between his rise and Kelly's misfortune.